Evening, everyone. Andrew here, back with episode 10. Believe that? In the story of how I became the All-American boy in Vietnam in 1968, I might add. So, in 1968, the United States was obviously being the chief prosecutor in Southeast Asia, but we were a part of a larger coalition. The Canadians were our allies, and the Australians were our allies. The Brits were our allies. We had a number of allies in Southeast Asia. And one of the evidences of that coalition was the C7 Caribou. The C7 Caribou was a short takeoff and landing aircraft with a ramp in the back like a C-130, but it was a much smaller airplane. It had radial engines, 2 radial engines, 3-bladed props. It was about 80 or 90 feet long, about a 100-foot wingspan, and it could take off and land on runways that were too small for the C-130. And if you've ever seen any news footage of the C-130 landing on the strips in places like Quezon, you go, my God, how could a big plane like that land in such a small spot? Well, the Caribous could take off and land on runways that were only about 1,000 feet long, 1,200 feet long at the max. So anyhow, we rode over from our compound in Saigon over to Tan Son Nhut Air Base, where we hooked up with a Caribou. And as I recall, I'm somewhat foggy on this, but as I recall, it was an Australian airplane made in Canada. That was under Australian control, made in Canada, and they were going to fly us, to the, had to burp, sorry. They were going to fly us up to the airbase at a place called TuyHoa. Now, again, I have to apologize because I really should have a chronological order that I can definitively point out, where and when I was where and when. But that's not the way my mind works, and that's not the logistics of making this video. I'll just tell you the best that I can remember. And to the best of my memory, we went to TuyHoa. And the reason I'm thinking that it was TuyHoa is because when we got there, it was not what we were looking for. It was not what we expected at all. TuyHoa was a relatively young American installation. It was still under construction. They started building it, I believe, in late 1966. And here we were in mid-1968. And there was still a lot of unfinished construction going on, building barracks and maintenance facilities and hangars and all sorts of, well, you know how it is at a military base. And it was under construction. Well, it turns out that a lot of it was under reconstruction because the Viet Cong sappers had come in with their bags of explosives and blown the hell out of the place. And those barracks were all blown up, and a lot of people got killed. The airplanes, there was 5 C-130s that got destroyed there at the airbase. That's a huge loss, a huge loss. So in we fly in our C7 Caribou. And with us is a CBS newsman that we met at Tan Son Nhut, who hitched a ride with us because he wanted to go to TuyHoa and see the destruction up there. And the Army was giving him no cooperation whatsoever. Uh, they didn't want the news media telling the true story of what was happening in Vietnam. They wanted to manage the news in such a way that it made us look like heroes and the inflated body count and so forth and so on. But anyhow, we were happy to fly with him and learn about his experience with CBS News. Turned out that Dan Rather was the CBS reporter in Dallas in November 22nd of 1963 when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And that's how he made his bones with the network, by doing such a good job there. Well, so in we fly into TuyHoa, and I think I might have mentioned this to you in the stream past, but when we got there, we were on our own. Nobody knew who we were and what we were doing on that airplane, and we had the other guitar player, the rhythm guitar player. We called him Alphabet because we couldn't pronounce his name. I think his real name was Swierczynski or something like that. A lot of letters in his name. But we sent him off. He was our designated communicator with our office in Saigon. And so we sent him off to try and find communications. And the other guys wandered off to see if they could find a place to have some shots. And I stayed. It was my job to watch the equipment. And so I stayed there in what at a regular airport would be the parking lot. But in our case, it was a place where they just stacked equipment and stacked gear. There are forklifts and all that stuff all around. Well, I waited and I waited and I waited. And it got hotter and muggier and hotter and muggier. And it was kind of a pain in the behind. I couldn't get off to smoke weed because those guitars, man, they disappear in a heartbeat. But anyhow, I remember having this thought process in my mind that this was boring and it was troublesome and I didn't like it. And I remember this thought process where I could decide that this was the worst experience I'd ever had and get really upset, or I could just buckle down and make a decision that this was going to be the greatest adventure of my life. And I might as well enjoy it and remember it and make the most of it. And so I found a shady place and got my guitar out and I started playing. Trying to write a song. I was having a really hard time writing a song. I hadn't written songs at that point in my career, but one of the guys down in Saigon had taught me a new chord that I didn't know before. It was called a D major seventh, and in the D major seventh, your first finger plays the fifth fret of the fifth string and bars the neck at the fifth fret, and then the second finger plays the sixth fret of the second string. The third finger plays the seventh fret of the third string, and the little finger plays the seventh fret of the first string. And that's how you play a D major seventh chord. And so in practicing that, I went from the fifth fret, D seventh, to the first fret, to the B flat, I think, yeah. So it's from the fifth fret to the first fret, to the seventh fret, to the third fret. And before I knew it, I had a chord progression just all based on that one D7th chord. And it used up my time there at TuyHoa. Or I think it was TuyHoa. It was fairly close to the ocean. And, well, before long, Swerzinski comes back and he says they'll be along in a little bit. They came along in a little bit with a deuce and a half, and we loaded all our gear onto the deuce and a half, 2.5 ton truck. And they took us over to the Enlisted Man's Club, where we unloaded and we set up our gear and got tuned up and got ready to play. Had some dinner, and we were all set to go on and perform. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the audience? Who are we going to play for? And there was hardly anybody in that place at all. And I think they considered it to be bad luck, the Enlisted Man's Club to be a bad luck place, because apparently during the attack on TuyHoa, the Enlisted Man's Club was the first place to get blown up. I mean, it was destroyed. Well, rebuilt by the time we got there. But there was hardly anybody in the place. And that's okay, because we played poorly. That was our first time to perform. We had practiced in Saigon, but we had never really performed. And so we played, and we did the best we could. We jammed around a little bit just because, there was no reason not to. And that's when I discovered that our sax player from Memphis, he could really, really play. He was a soulful saxophone player, and he had this marvelous, beautiful tone. I think his first name was Earl, and man, he was a fine musician, and that, to me, that made that whole evening worthwhile, was to be able to play with such a fine guy. And I even threw in my D major seventh a couple of times just for flavor. And that started my odyssey of learning jazz chords. And I'm still not a proficient jazz player, but at least I know, a dozen jazz chords, like a minor seventh, a ninth, and an 11th, and a 13th, and a 13th drop 9. So I learned a bunch of jazz chords. I still love them. I still play them. Okay, so anyhow, we played at TuyHoa for practically nothing, and then spent virtually all night waiting for the rockets to come in, which they didn't come. Thank God, thank God, thank God. And the next day, they loaded us on a C-130. And I thought, oh, well, at least we'll go someplace where there's a runway. And again, I don't want to make too big a deal about this, but as I recall, this is not definitive. Don't hold me to it. Take me to court. But I believe our second show was in a town called DongHa. And for those of you in Northern Virginia who know something about the geography there, you know that Falls Church and Arlington and McLean, they all fit together like puzzle pieces. Well, in DongHa fit up against the DMZ the way that Arlington butts up against Fairfax County. They're contiguous. And so there we were in DongHa. We flew in on a C-130, and it was much more organized. When we got there, they were expecting us, and they were looking forward to our performance, and they had built a stage for us outdoors. It was a nice big stage. It was lots of room for 5 guys. And I said, where are we? Where is DongHa? And they showed me on a map how close we were to the DMZ. I mean, the actual line, well, I don't know, maybe 300 yards from where we were playing. So, and DongHa was a dangerous, dangerous place. I mean, they got hit every frickin' night. Boom, boom, boom. In come the rockets. In come the mortars. Man, it was a testament to the fact that the special services was able to recruit volunteers to go and play in places like that and help to bolster the morale. Because, I mean, how would you like to be in a neighborhood that got hit with rockets every night? No, you wouldn't like it. And the guys in DongHa didn't like it either. So, anyhow, I had learned a few words in Vietnamese, just a couple, just a few. And when they told us how close we were to the DMZ, I said, guys, I've got an idea. Let's turn our amplifiers around and point them at North Vietnam and try to communicate with our North Vietnamese brethren that we're just here to entertain. We're just here to play music. We mean no aggression. And so I used my few little Vietnamese words. Sing lo minh nhoi. Well, anyhow, a couple of other words that I don't really remember very well and pronounce even worse than sing lo minh nhoi. But Kanam. Well, so we started playing, and it was drizzling a little bit, and there was a tarp over the stage, so we just kept playing. And it rained a little bit harder, and it rained a little bit harder. And then it finally started raining in for real. And so we were getting shocked with hitting the microphone with our lips. We were getting shocked. And I thought, oh, man, this is really bad. So we took a short break until the rain let up. And when the rain let up, that dirt area in front of the stage had turned into a muddy mosh pit. And the soldiers didn't care, man. The soldiers loved it. They were down there sliding around. It was like a giant slip and slide. You remember the slip and slide toys? And we were playing, hold on, I'm coming, hold on, I'm coming. And the guys were on the ground doing the alligator, the crocodile rock. You know what the alligator is? That's when you lie in the mud and perform the breaststroke motions, and you get completely as muddy as humanly possible. That's what the real crocodile rock is, you understand. Crocodile. Well, anyhow, we saw it live and in person, and it was exhilarating, and it made up for the lackluster performance we had the night earlier in TuyHoa. And there we were, and God, we played until my amplifier blew up. We were turned up to 10, had the tone all the way turned up to 10. Everything was turned up to 10, and I blew that Fender amp. And it just couldn't get anything out of that amp but noise. Well, that's okay, because we had played from about 8 o'clock at night, took a little break for the rain, but then we played until about 2 o'clock in the morning, and no rockets came in that night. And I thought, ha, 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 the music has the power to soothe the savage beast. I didn't know it was Savage Breast at that time, but, what the hell, this is just a stupid farm kid. A stupid farm kid who played guitar. And I thought, well, thank you, Vietnam. Thank you for not shelling us tonight. And I wish we could stay and play for you tomorrow. But tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., we have to fly out of here and fly to Camp Eagle. And so long for now. We'll see you later. No rockets. Oh, excellent, excellent. So we spent pretty much a sleepless night waiting for the aircraft to take us to Camp Eagle. This time we were going to be transported by helicopter, and this camp we were going to, it was like, yeah, well, I'll tell you that in the next episode. We're getting up over 20 minutes already, but well, it was a wild experience. Okay, so the next morning we get up and receive the information that we are not actually going to Camp Eagle. We're going someplace else on a C-130. So off we go on a C-130, and I didn't know where we were going, and I don't think the other guys knew either. But it's A-okay, who cares? It's just one more place to play. So when we got to where we were going, and for some reason the name Phan Rang sticks in my mind, and oh my golly day, it was a beautiful, beautiful location. There was like Bermuda grass that went, went from the foothills all the way down to the ocean, and it was exquisitely manicured. It was like the mowers were out there every day with their golf course equipment. Well, anyhow, I stuck my head into the headquarters area to try and get a grip on where we were going and what we were playing. And I heard a news report on the Armed Forces radio and television. Now, that was not something that was everywhere in Vietnam, but there, at the larger bases, there was actually television transmitters, and they were actually reporting that, well, it wasn't really the news, it was the propaganda of the day. And they reported to us how at 8 o'clock, the NVA had attacked the base at DongHa, and they blew up the ammo dump. Just a couple hours after we left, the NVA blew that place to smithereens. And so I've had this fantasy pretty much all my adult life that with the right music performance, you can end a war. And that brings me to the serious message of why I'm doing these episodes in the first place. And I really feel that the core purpose in my life right now is to share fundamental values that people can rely on every day. I was up at the VA talking to a fella, and the chaplain came up and was overhearing. I was talking to this fellow who was in the psych ward up there, and I was telling him that the path to success and the path to joy was in discovering reliable fundamental values and then living according to those values. And that snippy, it was a female chaplain, she was so snippy. Oh yeah? Fundamental values like what? Be a good boy? Obey God? I said, no, you stupid lady. I'm talking about fundamental values like gravity. Yeah, you can ignore gravity if you want. Nobody's forcing you to pay attention. But you can only ignore gravity for so long, and the effect will ultimately catch up with you. And other values that you can rely on as being true fundamental values, the honesty and integrity, telling the truth, making a promise and keeping it. These are the kind of fundamental values that lead inevitably to a life of joy. I mean, everybody's got baggage. Everybody's got stuff that they did that they wish they hadn't done. And everybody has opportunities in the future to make better choices. And my counsel is find the fundamental values. People have different sources for the truth, but the truth is the truth. And no amount of lies can cover lies. The truth always shines through. It's like light in a dark, dark night. You can have all the darkness in the world, cannot cover the light. The light shines through the darkness, and truth will ultimately come out, and liars ultimately pay the price for their lies. And liars, they pay the price for their lies as soon as they tell it. That's just karma. That's just the way it is. So my advice to all of you, my heartfelt advice, find the iron rod, hold on to it, grab onto it, and never let go. Because that iron rod leads to joy. Some people call it the tree of life. And that's where you're going to find satisfying relationships, and that's where you're going to find a rewarding future. So anyhow, that's pretty much episode 10. And in episode 11, I'll tell you about going to DongHa. DongHa, the home of the finest marijuana in all of Vietnam. Oh my God, what a story. Anyhow, I can't wait to tell it, but that will wait until tomorrow. And as for now, you know what I say, is don't forget to breathe, and peace out.